I am mining investor and editor of Resource Stock Digest, among a bunch of other adjectives. I am Gerardo Del Real, along with my partner, Mr. Nick Hodge, who's also an investor and publisher of Daily Profit Cycle. This is the 323rd episode of our weekly therapy session. Man, do we need it this week again, that we call Investing in Bizarro World. We're going to talk markets, what we're investing in, gold, silver, platinum, palladium, copper, uranium. It's all happening, folks. Let's get right into it. First and foremost, Mr. Nick Hodge, how are you today?
Doing good, Gerardo. A little bit cooler here in the Pacific Northwest than it is in the rest of the country as summer gets underway, but the market is hot no matter where you're at. New all-time record highs in the S&P and many commodities and precious metals breaking out. I know we'll talk about it. How are you, sir?
I am phenomenal. I am enthusiastic. I've been waiting for the second half of this year for, it feels like 2 years. I've been talking about the second half of 2025 and the second half of 2025. And that's kind of when I saw things breaking out. And hell, even Lithium's got some green shoots. We'll get into that. Some of those names, I see short positions being closed out. I want to talk about the correlation between platinum, palladium, and lithium, because I think there's some, I hate the word, but there's some synergies going on there. I think the advent of, electric vehicle sales not slowing down, still soaring. I think hybrid vehicles becoming, a very, very popular alternative to strictly EVs. I think all of that is contributing to that platinum and palladium price absolutely ripping. And so look, let's just start there, because I kind of already did, man. Platinum is seeing prices that we haven't seen in over a decade, up some 4.5% today. Palladium is up some 7% today. And this is far from a one-off, not just daily or weekly, but we've had, quietly, we talked about this last week and the week before, quietly, platinum and palladium have put in a couple of months of really, really good bottoms and then just surging 30-40% higher here over the past several months. I know that look, Nick, because I've known you for a minute now. You're looking at charts. What do you see in there with your chartist eyes?
I mean, this thing is breaking out pretty good. I'm talking about platinum specifically, which we talked about a week or two ago. Look, it's added $300 in the past month. It's trading over $1,400 an ounce. That's definitely a 5-year high. You got to go all the way back to 2014 to get a platinum price at 1426. So I mean, you're in God's country now, as they say. I mean, with that green candle I'm looking at here in the past month, the $300 candle. I mean, you get another one of those, you're at $1,700-$1,800 platinum, right? Gosh, I don't know the specific catalyst. I've turned into more of a macro guy, and I can sort of give you my take, and then you gave sort of the micro take about the electric vehicles and things. You're entering a transition in the U.S. and global economy in terms of inflation and growth, which I outlined yesterday in a foundational profits call-in. You went from negative GDP in the U.S. in the first quarter to likely what will be 1 to 2% growth. That's a pretty stark or staunch reversal from negative growth to positive growth. And you need commodities when you're growing. The other thing that's happening is the growth is starting to level off a little bit while the inflation ticks higher. So while we just grew real fast, and it's evidenced in the S&P as well, hitting new all-time record highs today, the inflation is going to tick higher while that growth levels off. So you'll likely see 1.5 to 2% growth for the next couple of quarters. And you've been around long enough to know what rising inflation and relatively flat growth is called. That's called stagflation, right?
I was going to call it a grower and a shower, but I digress.
I had a buddy who used to say all the time that he was a grower, not a shower. So don't judge on appearances.
Sometimes it goes that way.
So, in that environment, in that, quote unquote stagflationary environment, which I expect to persist for, a couple of quarters, call it 3 to 6 months, that's good for commodities. And we've only talked about platinum so far, but others are breaking out. And so that's sort of the macro take. And then, diving into the metals a little bit, I mean, it's just a cascading of one, commodity super cycle, which I believe started in 2020, and it's going to have different ebbs and flows. And two, a spillover of a precious metals bull market that is now affecting various corners of that precious metals market, right? We were talking about silver in recent weeks, and now we're talking about PGMs here. I haven't checked in on rhodium of late. I wonder what it's trading at.
It's rhodium is running along with it. I'll give you the exact number here. Last check, 51.25. Nope, just kidding. 5,400, close to the 5,400 mark. So
these ladies are going to start wanting rhodium rings.
Hey, it's hot in them streets. It's a hot summer this year, and the rhodium rings is going to be lit, right? Look, anybody that's been sitting on the sideline waiting for the all clear in the commodity space, this is as convincing a signal for the next leg higher in pretty much everything, even lithium, as I've seen in quite some time. I'll preface my lithium thing by saying I've been wrong about lithium. This, in my brain, this was supposed to happen over a year ago, and China has been a whole hell of a lot better at calling the market and flooding the market than I have been at calling it bottom. It's not consequential other than for ego reasons, right? So our group owns a whole hell of a lot of lithium exposure. And so private and public, I like to see those assets marked at the higher price, but I also know that, those shareholdings are for the longer term. They're not for the bottom of the lithium cycle. So yeah, would I have preferred to have seen Patriot stay at 15? Absolutely. Do I think it gets back there with what's coming? Yeah, absolutely, with the value that they're creating over there. So lithium would be the laggard of all of the other commodities, but look at copper, firmly above the $5 level on the spot price, right? The future spot price. The stockpiles are getting smaller. The demand is increasing. The discoveries are getting harder to make. This isn't a very complicated thesis, folks. This is simple. Oh, Gerardo Del Real over here just outside of Austin, Texas, telling you this is a simple story. Pick your favorite names, pick your risk tolerance, and go make yourself some money, please, because God knows it's not getting any easier for savers, right? We're going to talk about our brilliant U.S. government. I got to say, we have some of the most incompetent people on both sides in office that we've had for quite some time. And that's saying a lot because, my Lord, the last administration sure in the heck wasn't the brightest bulbs in the box, right? But, for all their faults, well, a couple of things. For all their faults, they are expediting this commodity super cycle, right? With the expediting of permitting here in the U.S., with the uranium boom that's coming, with a lot of the red tape being eliminated. That's a huge plus. Kudos to the administration. They've done a great job of that. When I see talk of the federal government, Fannie and Freddie, now wanting to accept all crypto, as collateral for federally backed loans, meaning backed by U.S. money, taxpayers, and we're running $37 trillion deficits, it tells me we haven't learned anything or we don't give a fuck. And you know what I think? I think they know exactly what they're doing. I think they just don't care. And I rant to say that you need to be an asset owner, because working a 9 to 5 and hoping to get a 401k that one day is enough to sustain your lifestyle for the last 20 to 30 years of your life, that ship has sailed. I don't think we're in that America anymore. I think you have to be proactive. I think you need to take your financial future into your own hands. I think you need to get educated about the things that are going on, because a lot of the stuff that I see coming to pass over the next several years, whether it's 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, is going to be hugely beneficial, of course, as it always is, to asset owners, and hugely detrimental, as it has been for over 2 decades, to savers, right? We haven't touched bonds, and even those are stabilizing the rates, the yields. It's been several weeks now where we haven't seen, those rates that 10-year that everybody was so worried about surge past that 5% level. That's, again, I think speaks to the stagflation that the market's sniffing out and is front running to some degree. So I know it sounds like I'm all over the place with it. All of those things are actually very interconnected, folks. And it's time to learn how those things are interconnected. And again, back to the commodity super cycle to bring full circle. Green means go, folks. It's go time. Like, you get your positions, top them off. And this is the time to go learn some things and go start doing some things in the market, because you can do very, very well when the macro thesis lines up and you find someone or you learn how to make some stock picks that actually execute for you.
A lot there. Let's see what I can do with it. So First on the commodity kickoff and the administration. Yeah, they've done a ton already to expedite the permitting process, as you said, cut the red tape, provide guidance and guidelines, and not just for resources for mines, but for some of the technologies that end up using them, like nuclear reactors, etc. I think Trump has issued, 4 executive orders that have to do with uranium and nuclear energy since he's been in office, as well as what he's doing with the Commerce Department and copper, etc. So, and we've seen early on, stocks like Trilogy and the AMLO Road stuff get directly addressed, and the performance that those stocks have delivered. I actually went through a couple of companies for some research I was doing the other day. For some upcoming marketing, and the research was about companies that have already been impacted by these things. And it wasn't hard for me to come up with a handful, sort of 5 to 10 examples of companies that have gone up just since the election or year to date in 2025, 100 to 500% as a result of these executive orders that have been issued. And I think it's reverberating around the country and in fact the world, right? Because some of these things we knew, like you just outlined the copper deficits and the stockpile shrinking, and there's going to be a shortage for the next 15 years. Tell me something I haven't known for the past 5 years, Gerardo, right? It's like, but when was the catalyst going to come, right? And I think it's come in the form of these geopolitical events of the past 6 months to 18 months, coupled with these executive orders. So that's that. Yes, the asset owners are going to win. The asset owners always win. Rick Rule's been talking about this recently, and it's something you and I have talked about a lot too. And for me, it sort of gets into like a gray area in my brain. Like we can talk it down to a point or down to a funnel. We can talk about the debt. We can check down the deficit. We can talk about the money printing. We can talk about the Federal Reserve. We can talk about the inequality. We can talk about the fourth turning. And then it's like, okay, well, like how does this all get wrapped up and resolved? And when? Like, are we going to print $1 trillion coin? Are we going to default on our debt? Are we going to inflate the debt away? Of course, it's going to be some combination of all those things, except for maybe the $1 trillion coin. But what is going to happen in that is that the asset owners are going to win, and you're going to get an opportunity and resources that could help you maintain assets and purchasing power that outruns whatever happens to the purchasing power of the dollar through that inflation and money printing. So you mentioned retirement and 401ks. I was having dinner with someone recently who works for the government, and some of those deals are still out there. This guy was saying he could work for the government. I forget the amount of time. It was 12 or 15 years, and then he can get 75% of his peak 3 years of salary and earnings and for perpetuity and go get another job. So there is still some of that government stuff going around. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that because I had dinner. But you touched on Fannie and Freddie, and I was interested in this because I saw Mr. Polt, who is like head of housing or something now, from Polt Builders, of course. So he has a vested interest in that position. His dad was a owner of one of those big home builders, right? Polt, Pulte. I'm probably not pronouncing it right, but I did see him tweet yesterday that exactly as you said, crypto is now viable collateral for loans backed or issued by Fannie and Freddie. And so I thought that was something new, right? So my neighbor is a mortgage agent, and I flipped him the story real quick. I said, hey, did you see this cross the wire or whatever? And he says, you can already use crypto to buy houses. He was like, I've got a lady right now who was early into Ripple, and she's using those proceeds to buy a house. You just got to be able to prove the paper trail of how you bought and sold it, and by all means you can use that money. And I said, well, what about is in terms of asset to debt ratios, like levels, right? Which is what this is about, and changed. And I think he had said, actually, let me pull up the text real quick because I want to see what he said. He was texting me last night while I was at dinner with the government guys. So
there you go. That's how we do due diligence around here, folks. Even when we're eating, we're out there getting it in.
He says, you can already use crypto to buy a home. I have a client right now that got into XRP early. You just have to document the paper trail. And I said, yeah, but what about the assets? And he said, yeah, that's good. Showing more assets outside of your cash to close really doesn't impact approvals, unfortunately, but they may tweak that. So, anyway, I don't know what my takeaway is here. Oh, I kind of do know. So We'll see what that does for the housing industry, but the housing industry is struggling, and that's the point I wanted to make. So, I told you I've got this office now that's in a real estate office.
Yeah.
Look at me bringing all the real world due diligence.
Yep.
And so I hear the conversations that are going on. I told you about some of them already. One I heard in the lunchroom the other day was this guy talking about how he was getting this gal in a home who only had $500 to her name, right? And I didn't catch the whole conversation because I wasn't going to stand there in front of the microwave and eavesdrop, but I heard enough to make my spidey senses start tingling. And I heard stuff about like getting a letter from the mom and using some of the mom's assets. And I just walked out of the lunchroom like, here we go again, boy.
Y'all go watch The Big Short if you want to see what comes next, everybody. I don't know when it's coming. I don't know if it's this year, next year, whenever. And again, I'm usually the optimist in the group. These things don't end well, and you can kick the can down the road, for years on end. But eventually, eventually the tide comes in, right? That's just kind of the way that it goes. I got to talk gold, got to talk silver. I'll give the simple take. They both still look very good to me. Both caught a bid this week. Silver, to your point last week, another standout week, outperforming the gold price, and really looking like it wants to go get into the 40s really quickly.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add there. I'll give you something in 1 second when I pull this thing up that I can read off of. But, gold pulled back below 3,400. That's a buy, right? It could add $100 in a hurry. It's consolidating sort of in that channel between, I don't know, 3,250, 3,300 up to 3,500. And the next move will likely be higher for lots of the reasons that we outline week in and week out. On silver, I mean, it's bullish all the way down to sort of 35.30, 35.50.
Yeah,
is holding well above that, and that's what I mean when we were talking about platinum by the progression of a precious metals bull market. You get a gold that goes up, that ascends, and then you get silver that does so later and more violently. And so we're seeing that right now. But not much else to add to that. We've talked about the picks. I've talked about the ETFs, and we've given presentations and call-ins and all our publications. So have really covered and positioned well for the move in gold and silver. And if there's one takeaway, at least from a macro standpoint, it's like this downward move in gold, or this consolidation move in gold, is to be bought. I was trying to talk myself out of it a couple of weeks ago. Like I almost trimmed a little bit, and I'm glad I didn't, because
good job, Nick.
yeah, we're still in a gold bull market, and it's just consolidating. So not much else besides that to add.
Yeah, it's a fun market when things are going so well that you're like, are they gonna is it a rug pull? Like, are they gonna pull the rug out from underneath me? Like, everything shouldn't be green every day, right? And most of everything, not everything, but most of everything has been green for quite some time now, and I suspect that most of everything continues to be green, and I suspect that green accelerates, especially as it relates to the equities. And so, just to tie it all in, let's throw uranium into the party of where everything is going higher for many, many reasons. We touched on it last week. I don't want to rehash all those points, but look, the equities are typically the last to move, and the explorers are the last to move as it relates to commodity prices going higher. The producers usually catch the first bid, then it's the developers, and then it's the explorers. And the part that I get excited about is that, yes, some of the explorers that have made significant discoveries are running, but we haven't had that market in quite some time, and we don't have it yet, where if you just attach gold to the name of your company or platinum to the name of your company, you catch a bid and you can go raise $30 million. It's not that market yet. Unfortunately, I think we're going to get that market here in the next couple of years. That'll be a real good thing for real companies and real stock pickers that are actually doing due diligence like Nick and I are. And again, not to say we're going to get them all right, but look, we gave y'all a pick last week in the premium portion of this podcast, and it's a pick that's in the portfolio. It's on both of our portfolios, and that thing is so drastically undervalued right now, given the platinum price, given the palladium price, and given where, it looks like that breakout is headed and how much of it they have. That could re-rate to $5 and then $7 and be a $10 takeout in months. It happens that quickly in this space, folks. So for those of you that haven't caught a bull market like this, where, you invest $5,000 or you invest $10,000 and you think, well, it's only $5,000 or $10,000. your $5,000-$10,000 could become 30,000-40,000 really, really quick. And when you still have a bull market to reallocate that capital, you can do some damage, some good damage for yourself there if you happen to catch a couple of good breaks and do some hard work. So look, talking our own book, but this podcast is pretty much free for the most part. You can catch the bulk of it free. You can catch the premium portion of it for less than a cup of coffee a day. And again, I think in this market, we did pretty all right during the bear market. This one's going to be really, really fun and is off to a heck of a start.
Yeah, pretty all right for sure. And especially in the case of private placements, we've outlined how those have performed. I don't want to make it up because I don't have the numbers in front of me, but something like 4 or 5 or 6 out of 7 or 8 recent deals are up 100 to 400 or 500%. And the reason I bring that up is because we'll have a new copper deal next week. So I just wanted to plant that seed. Because we haven't written a ton of checks. We did in the first quarter, but in the second quarter, we haven't written a ton of checks. And we have a copper deal coming next week that is pretty juicy. It speaks to our network. You'll see some names that are tied to it that you'll definitely recognize. The company will be restructuring as a result of those names coming in. And so that's sort of the network that we bring, and thereby you get to have access to these deals where we're vetting them, and in some cases, restructuring them commensurately with, or contemporaneously, I should say, at the same time with financing them. So you'll be able to come into that deal at the same level that these new strategic investors and we're getting into it. So that's that. On uranium, it's at $77 or $78 a pound right now. Yeah, I was looking earlier. And the news has just kept coming, right? We did cover some of it last week, so I don't want to talk at length about it. The only news item we've gotten since then is over the weekend or Monday, the New York governor, Kathy Hochul, announcing a new reactor to be built in New York State. And if you think back to last week or the week before when Meta had its announcement, it was going to partner with Constellation to provide power to its data centers. That energy complex that electricity is going to come from is in Chicago or Illinois, right?
Illinois,
And I think back to the extension of nuclear reactor lives in California, and the reason I bring this up is because it's political, or apolitical actually, which is very good, right?
Yes.
I can remember a time where Democrats at the federal level and the state level were opposed to nuclear plant life extensions, were opposed to new reactor builds, were opposed to nuclear in general. And we've seen it play out and called it in real time as it played out. Like, you guys aren't going to be able to meet, I'm talking about the Democrats, you guys aren't going to be able to meet your climate targets and your emissions reduction goals without embracing this nuclear thing. And so, sort of like with copper, and I told you, tell me something I haven't known in the past 5 years. Like, well, Ms. Hochul, tell me something I haven't known in the past 5 to 10 years. Of course, this country was going to need plant life extensions and new nuclear reactor builds to not just meet your climate goals, because I'm still kind of unconvinced, but certainly to keep the grid stable. And to keep and power these data centers. Like, if you want to be number one in the world in AI and healthcare and things like that, you need robust sources of power. So that's coming. And I guess that's it on uranium. Oh no, this is the last point. So I see these deals getting inked with utilities, and I see these nuclear stocks going up. I actually wrote an editorial about this in Daily Profit Cycle. And the companies that have received the most love are the nuclear stocks, right? The Oklos of the world, the NuScales of the world. There's one called like Nano Nuclear, trades under the ticker NNE. There's Centrus Energy, which has a deal to provide highly enriched fuel to the Department of Energy, and that stock has gone gangbusters. And a couple of others. And I equated it to the transition from horses to internal combustion engines, because like Henry Ford did great, right? He died worth $200 billion in modern day terms, and that's a lot of fucking money, obviously. But who had twice that at his death? It was John D. Rockefeller at $400 billion. Because he provided the fuel that went in those engines. And so it's a very easy analog, right? Yeah, the nuclear engines, the new nuclear tech, that stuff's going to be very valuable. There's a reason Bill Gates has invested in TerraPower. But at the end of the day, they all still run on uranium. And by the way, like, we're already in a deficit or a future deficit just with the reactors we have. Go ahead and start extending the life of them. Go ahead and start adding new ones. Go ahead and start building small modular reactors. And oh, by the way, there's no stockpiles of uranium like there is for other commodities, right? Like, you got to get it out of the ground. So obviously I'm talking my book as well, and I firmly believe in these uranium exploration and development stories, but I think the catch-up trade is going to be something to behold when it does come.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I think that's probably, unless you want to get anything else off your chest, a good segue into the premium portion of the podcast, right? I know there's a uranium name there. Actually, no. Before we do that, I don't want to forget this again. We chatted a bit off air. The last couple of weeks have been so insane on a geopolitical level, on the domestic front, like. It's just been a lot, folks. And so we haven't even touched on the Minnesota senator who was gunned down, killed, and his wife shot by a guy that had a kill list of Democrats who pretended to be an officer, pretended to have a badge, rolled up in a vehicle that looked like a police vehicle. But when he couldn't identify himself, the senator, tried fighting back and ended up losing his life. And the fact that in America right now, the news cycle is so bonkers, that we just didn't even touch on it because there's 100 other things, right? Kind of tells you what fourth turnings do and how they look like. And unfortunately, the bloodshed that happens during these turnings. I was reading an article 2 days ago, and it breaks my heart, man. It was a Harvard review study that they conducted, and they said that 200,000 Palestinian children have gone missing. That's separate from the ones they've confirmed killed. And again, that didn't get a mention from very many people in the real media. Like, we're not real media. It's just Nick and Gerardo sharing some stock picks, giving you some things we see, hoping we can make you a little bit of money, trying to make ourselves a little bit of money, doing a pretty okay job, knock on wood, thankfully. And then we have some thoughts about the world because we live in the world, right? But stuff like that, man, it's a crazy, crazy time. It's a crazy, crazy time. And then I got to listen to politicians and our Secretary of Defense get up there.
You don't have to, but anyway.
You kind of got to know what's going on, right? It's tough not to if you want to stay in the know. It's funny. I had this conversation with my wife the other day. Anytime she refuses to watch the news except for every now and then because of how dark and grim it's become. And so anytime something comes up, she's like, "Can you just explain what that means for us, right? Can you explain what that means as far as that issue goes?" And I'll give her my take on it. And she's like, "Okay, that's enough. I don't need to see all the pictures. I don't need to, just immerse myself in that." And it's not like I like immersing myself in it, but if you're trying to stay, relevant as it relates to news and geopolitical risk and trends and everything else, like, you kind of have to take in, X amount of that. And for me to just, it's just a crazy time, folks. It's just a crazy time. You got a president, again, on Adderall that rage tweets every time something goes not his way. You got him taking a victory lap for brokering a peace deal with Israel. And then, or with Iran, I'm sorry, I lose track of my wars here, with Iran. And then, like, 5 hours later, he's cursing at the TV screen, saying they don't know what the fuck they're doing. And really,
the journalist asking him, he was walking to the helicopter, I think, yeah.
Right. And he's mad at them because he doesn't know what he's doing. Clearly, he's out of his league on this stuff, right? And clearly, the U.S. isn't exerting the influence on Israel or Iran that is required to allow nations to actually honor the ceasefires that they agree to. Now, I don't want to get into the blame game and say it's Israel or say it's Iran. Above my pay grade. I wasn't there. I didn't negotiate the deal. But I'm also not the one taking a victory lap, asking for a Nobel Peace Prize in the middle of the night, and then waking up and realizing that the whole fucking thing is falling apart, and then get mad at the reporter when the reporter asked me. And so I bring that up because the Secretary of Defense was on TV today, and they asked him, again, a journalist said, "Hey, like, initial reports say that out of the 12 sites that you bombed, that you missed on 11 of them. And instead of responding, analytically and factually, and just giving, maybe an educated answer about, whatever happened, he starts berating the reporter and asking him or her if they've ever flown a fighter jet, if they've ever been up for 36 hours while in the air. And listen, everybody knows I got the utmost respect for the military.
Sure.
Utmost. But when I sign up for a job, I don't complain when I have to do it, right? And in fairness to those fighter pilots, they weren't complaining. It's the Secretary of Defense up there berating a journalist as if the journalist sent them to war. No, motherfucker, you sent them up in the air. You're the one that put their lives at risk.
And planned the targets, for sure.
And planned the targets. And again, took a victory lap initially. And then you get embarrassed on national television when somebody cites the facts. And increasingly, we're living in an era where, like, the people in charge, the powers that be, like the real powers that be, believe that facts don't matter if they could just say the lie long enough, right? It's real Orwellian 1984 stuff that's going on right now. And it's so obvious to me, but it's kind of sad in a way how many people it's not obvious to, right?
It is.
And so I think the optimist in me says a couple of more years of this, it'll be so blatant, because it already is in my eyes, right? But it'll be so blatant to everybody that nobody will believe anybody, and everybody will just be forced to go away. And hopefully we get a new group of left-leaning and right-leaning and libertarians that all come together and decide to base political careers on the truth. I don't know if that's me being a little bit too optimistic, but man, it's a shit show right now, folks. On both sides. Sides.
It's very Orwellian. I told you I'm listening to actually 1984 right now. I only do a little bit each day, so I'm still going through it. But what you say is true. Like in the book, the guy's going around and he's trying to find old people that were around before things got Orwellian or, controlled by the Big Brother or whatever. And people are so confused, and all the books have been burned and the history altered that you can't sort of find what the truth was. The scene I was listening to yesterday was, he was in a pub with an old guy trying to elicit what life was like. And, he remembers details of his own life. I can't recall verbatim, but, he remembers his sister-in-law dying, and he remembers, being mad at his bosses when he was working the bourgeoisie or whatever. But he can't articulate if he was freer before or now, or if life was better before or now, because it's like the fog of war, right? Like you just said, there's so much going on, and we're living in a post-truth world where they don't care about facts, and they just get up there and spew their narrative, and then the media regurgitates it depending on what their allegiances are. Like, how can you figure something out? So I don't know where I want to go for there, except to say that there's obviously a ton of problems still going on in the world, right? Like, when we recorded this last week, it was before we bombed those nuclear sites over the weekend. So and then, Trump sort of gets up there and says they don't know what the fuck they're doing when, Iran still has its enriched uranium. Like, we didn't blow that up. They moved it or whatever before we blow up the target that it was at. So, and it's not just governmental problems, and it's not just international geopolitical problems. We still got problems at home, domestically, locally, with inequality and things like that. So I was going to talk about this realtor who was doing the fentanyl lean on Instagram this week, because that's how far we are into this opioid epidemic and homelessness crisis. I don't know how to say it. Like, it's into the zeitgeist now. Like, everyone knows what the fentanyl lean is, right? That this realtor can get on Instagram, do the fentanyl lean in front of a house. And he was saying, his message was like, I'm so dedicated to my clients that after you put an offer in on a house, I'll go do the fentanyl lean in front of it, so no competing offers come in above yours, right? And it got, I think as of yesterday, it had like 250,000 views, or maybe into the millions. It was probably into the millions, actually, because 250,000 is not that much. You and me have a video out there that's got 400,000 views right now, anyway. And so I told my wife about it when I went home. I was asking her if she had heard about this, and she was like, "Oh yeah, like I saw that. Like it was making its way around the internet, right?" And I say that to say I don't want to get too into it because, like the president, I too hate tweets sometimes, and we've got our own problems here in Spokane, which we're still dealing with. But like my wife was telling me at like school drop off the other week, they saw 3 different people shooting up just like from the car,
It's
right?
fucking
And so
insane, man.
you have these. And this is in, on the way to school, right? Like not driving through the quote unquote unsavory areas,
Private
right? Like
schools.
it's just become so ubiquitous that it's everywhere, right? And it's like, anyway, now I am sort of ranting, but I've been talking about going to city council and talking, but they don't want to hear from someone like me. Like you say, they don't care about facts, right? These are
No.
people who think that there's 7 genders or whatever. Like I don't even know how to communicate reality with these folks. And so anyway, I'll sort of stop there. Like it's a complete shit show. The mayor's new homeless plan got shot down a couple of weeks ago. They were in the council hall until 1 a.m. Even the Democrats voted against her, and they're going to do it again on June 30th. But all that to say, it's easy to forget about that stuff when, like you said, the number on the screen is green every day. And it's also hard to process how the number on the screen is green every day.
Yeah.
When you have all of this going on, hundreds of thousands of missing children, like you said, the zombie apocalypse on the streets of many American cities, such that everyone knows what a fentanyl-themed is. And yet, party hats and kazoos, 6,000 points on the S&P, $3,400 gold, copper breaking out, VIX breaking down. And so again, no real point here. This is just the ranting part of the podcast, but be thankful and at least aware of the position that you're in, that you can do something about it, right? Irrespective of what the fuck the government's doing or anybody else, right? You have the ability to be autonomous and to still be sovereign and to own the things that are going to go up as all this plays out. And sometimes, as bad as it sounds for humanity and compassion and empathy, you just got to put on your blinders, ignore the person on the corner sticking the fucking needle in their arm, and go home and make your deposit into your IRA and or buy your copper stock and take care of you and your family, because otherwise, at least for me, you take your eye off the ball sometimes. And so you really gotta in these times, which can last for years and have already lasted for years, you gotta be, I don't like the term dialed in, but you gotta be sort of laser focused on you and what matters to you, because there's powers out there, like you were just saying, that, make things shift that do affect you. And so I like what your wife asked, like, how does this affect us? And that's very right. Like, does this affect us? How does it affect us? If not, move on to the next one, right? And it just is what it is.
Yeah, and I guess I'll add one last point, and then we'll get to some premium picks, because I do want to talk a couple of those. However you lean politically, whatever you believe, can we just try to be a little more factual, folks? Is that too much to fucking ask? Like, can we just base dialogues and disagreements more on facts and less on, whatever floats your boat and however you like your float being boated? Can we just have conversations like old times where, like, you base it on numbers, right? 1 and 1 is 2, 2 and 2 is 4. And anyway, I'll leave that there. Let's get to the premium portion of the podcast. This was the 323rd episode of our weekly therapy session we call Investing in Bizarro World. Expect another crazy week, folks, but go do something nice for yourself, for your significant other, with your kids. Get outside. Trauma lives in the body, as I tell all the strippers, because that's what my therapist told me. And so you just got to let it loose, y'all. Go have some fun. Take care. Have a great week.
See ya. Let that stress out.